So, good afternoon everybody. We are going to start shell scripting now, and the shell that we are going to use to learn shell scripting is bash, which stands for born again shell, okay, which originated from the born shell. That was a Unix shell. From that shell the bash shell was originated and developed. First of all, let us try to understand what is a shell all about. A shell is a program in operating system that takes commands that are typed by the user and calls the operating system to run those commands. When you type a command on the terminal, which is called shell, which is a program, it takes that command and uses the operating system to execute those commands. For example, when you give a command like ls, you give a command ls. The ls command is executed by the operating system and displays the files in the current directory. cd is another command which is used to change the directory, and we go to a particular directory. This is the path that I have given, and at this path you go enter. The path is changed, the directory is changed, and now you are at the new path, and these are the files in the new path. So whenever you type in a command, the command is taken by the shell and is interpreted, executed with the help of an operating system. So shell basically is a program. When you launch your shell, or when you launch the terminal, here you see something like this. This which is the username, this which is the machine name, and this is the current working directory. As it is explained here, the username, the machine name, and tilde means this place tells you the current working directory, where this tilde sign has special meaning, means it is the home directory of the current logged in user. The current logged in user is Pravjot. Okay. The prompt dollar is called the prompt. That means you are logged in as a that is, the shell is ready to take the command. Or if you log in as a root user, which is like a super user, like administrator in Windows, which will have all the capabilities and permissions to do everything, when the root will log in, then the dollar prompt will change to hash. Ordinarily it is dollar, but when you log in as a root user, special user, super user like administrator in Windows, then the dollar prompt changes to hash prompt. Okay. Now when you give a command, how does the command execute? When you give a command ls and you press enter, then the control jumps with the ls, your command, as an argument, and it goes to a path environment variable. PATH, path. Path is an environment variable. Okay. Now let me take the whole thing to the Jamboard here and paste it here. Now if you look at this here, then this root at localhost dollar is here. It's not visible because of color. Root @ localhost tilde sign square bracket followed by dollar. Here you give the command, suppose you give the command ls. Now when you give the command ls, the control jumps to the path environment variable called path. This is an environment variable called path. Now this path is an environment variable. Path is an environment variable. Environment variables are set of variables that are declared by the operating system to describe the working environment. The working environment as in what will be the font of this text, color of this font, text background, light gray, white, and how you people images will be shared, how the button will look, all these things, what will be the size of this window, what will be the size of this video resolution and size, everything. All these things are explained by the operating system by putting the required values in variables called environment variables. So operating system declares path environment variables and also initializes the environment variables. Operating system declares and initializes the environment variable to describe the working environment. Okay, one of those many environment variables is called path environment variable, and this path environment variable contains standard paths. The path environment variable that you see here, it contains standard paths. It contains standard paths. Okay, this is your path environment variable, which contains standard paths. Like user lib64 separated by colon, another standard path, 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 and another, and another, and another, and another. So these are all called standard paths, all separated by colon. Now when you give a command called ls, the control jumps to the path environment variable along with ls as argument and finds a file called ls on these standard paths, then this standard path one by one. It tries to locate this ls in one of these standard paths. Whenever ls is found in any of these standard paths and that file is an executable file, it executes and it is said that the command has executed. If the file is not found in any of the standard paths, then you will get an error message, command not found. Like this. If you give a command ls was able to execute because the ls executable file was found on one of the standard paths. But if you give lls, it says command not found because lls as a command was not found on any of the standard paths. Okay, I will show you where you found the ls. Have a look at this. You go to cd/bin is binaries. It is one of the standard paths which you find at the path environment variable. When you list the contents of /bin, you will see commands like su, which is used to log in as a super user, ssh, which is the shell, cls, yes, it was one of the files at the standard paths, therefore it executed. Isn't it? This is how your commands execute. If the file will not be found here at any of the standard path, it will give command not found error. This is how your commands execute. So every time you give a command, control jumps to the path environment variable and it goes at these standard paths and tries to locate the routine associated with the command with the same name. And when found, then that routine, if executable, executes and produces the output on the terminal, on the shell. A shell acts as a wrapper around the operating system, just like the coconut shell around the coconut fruit. The shell provides security and it also provides interface, proper interface to the kernel features, kernel internals. The shell is primarily used by the user to increase their speed and efficiency, to do many things. at the same time using commands. The shell primarily automates some very complex task structures through the shell scripts. It will provide a greater control on your machine and the project and the network. It will allow you to do something that can be done remotely, or things that should be done by bypassing the GUI. Okay, shell allows you to perform tasks remotely. You can configure the network stack, the network connections, everything through shell scripting that you write using shells. Complex commands are then built into combining small commands. You can combine certain commands and make powerful commands. Okay, we will do that. Before that, we must understand what are shells. Now there are various types of shells are available in the network, in the market today. The very first shell that started was a Bourne shell, which was primarily created by Stephen Bourne, originally for the Unix operating system. So the Bourne shell is called the original Unix shell. The Bourne shell had many features like command line editing and argument repeating. It was a very efficient and handy shell, though the syntax was slightly different from what the programmers used to use then. It was launched in late 70s, primarily for the Unix operating system. But the Unix operating system was being written in C programming language. Now the programmers had a problem that they had to do the operating system development using C programming language and then shell scripting using Bourne shell scripting language, and both are very different. So the programmers, at the end of the day, they ended up by working on two different languages. Okay, so they decided that some C programmers, took their extra hours out and evolved the Bourne shell into a new shell called C shell. So now there were two shells, a Bourne shell working on Unix and a C shell also working on Unix, and all the C programmers were so happy working on C shells because the shell scripting language was similar to that of C. As Unix evolved, more features were required. So advanced version of Bourne shell was developed by David Cohn from AT&T Bell Labs, and the new shell was named after David Cohn, and the shell was called Corn shell. It is being used today also. It was now the new Unix shell. In mid-80s to late 80s, a new operating system came into the picture, that was Linux. It was supposed to be a free operating system, but the problems were two. One, for it to be truly free operating system, they needed two additional things. That was a compiler, which should be free of cost, and they needed a shell, which should be free of cost, and they had none. As far as compilers are concerned, Sir Richard Stallman, who was the founder of Free Software Foundation, who believed that the software should be free, the cost should be only the hardware cost. So Richard Stallman and Linus Torvalds came together, and GCC was made available through the Free Software Foundation, was made available free of cost to the Linux people, and the Linux people also in September 1991 contributed Linux to the free open source, and Linux became open source operating system from then onwards. Meanwhile, the shell, which was the Bourne shell, Unix shell, Corn shell, Unix shell, C shell, Unix shell, all were very costly and everybody could not afford it, and without the shell, the operating system was not a free operating system truly. So people started working on the old retired Unix shell, which was not even the Unix people were not using it, the Bourne shell, old shell. They picked up that old shell as a base and evolved the Bourne shell into the new shell called Bourne again shell, hence the name Bash. This Bash shell had all the features of Bourne shell and all the good features, new features of Corn shell, and many more advanced features. It had all the features of C shell and a new advanced C shell called TCSH. So Bourne shell had everything from the Bourne shell, the Bash shell had everything from the Bourne shell, from the Corn shell, from the C shell, from the TCSH shell, and it ruled the roost, and the best thing, it was free. So the rest of the shells obviously died their natural death. And the born again shell is being used on Linux and Macintosh operating systems now. It is the most powerful, versatile shell today, though it's a little heavy, so it is not used on embedded devices. Okay, later on many shells like Armquist shell, Xenial shell, RC shell, graphical shell came into picture, but no shell had future because the bash had all the features in it, and it was configurable also, and it was free of cost also. So there was no point. Today also there is no point for somebody to develop new shell, because bash will always be there. Bash is best. If some shell comes out that is better than bash shell, then the guys must have spent at least a decade on that, and then it will not be able to survive, because within 1 year all the good features of the new shell will be pulled out and put in bash again, after all if it's free. Okay, and there are no licensing required other than the open source license, which itself says open source, everything is open. So therefore bash shell rules the roost, and we are going to do bash shell programming. All the stories explained here. Bash, a shell compatible with born shell scripts, which had advanced features such as command line editing. A shell free of all the proprietary licenses. Offers command line editing like Corn shell, had the features of Corn shell also. File name compilation like the C shell. It ruled the roast. It is a default shell on the Linux and the Macintosh operating systems. Many other shells also came into picture, but none survived, and no shell had future until the best shell was available free of cost. Now the Corn shell, which was advanced Unix shell, continues to be in the market today, because it is today standardized. The Corn shell is standardized as a POSIX shell. POSIX is a standard, means portable operating system standard for information exchange. So the moment it becomes POSIX shell, it is now usable and is present in every operating system. If some operating system does not have POSIX shell, I mean the desktop operating system, it is not called the operating system. Okay, it is called SH. It is there in every machine, including your machine. Okay. If you want to know which shell you are working on currently, you can use the environment variable called shell. Okay, like in C you use printf, like in C++ you use cout, like in Python you use print. Similarly, in shell scripting you use echo to display the contents of shell. It says that you're using bin bash. You're using bash shell. There is another environment variable called who echo. Who is logged in? Oh, it doesn't say anything. Oh, sorry, it's uppercase. It will be lowercase. Who? Okay. Oh, it will be uppercase. Who is a command? Is it? Yeah, who is a command, not environment variable, sorry. So it says that Prabjot Singh is logged in at terminal number 1. Okay, you want to know through the command line arguments, you will use user command, which will say that the root is logged in. Like this, there are many environment variables that we can use. Now, you know that you are working on bin bash. You want to change your shell. Say you want to use C shell or Born shell, Corn shell, some other shell. Then the command to change the shell is chsh -s. -s stands for shell. chss is a command that says change the shell. -s means change the shell. I mean the shell. -s identifies the shell. Then after that you have to give the shell path and name. Okay, and you will be when you press enter, you will be prompted for the password, and when you give the password correctly, your shell will change. I'm not going to change it here, because otherwise I'll not be able to do some work with you guys, you know. Now when you change the shell will not change immediately actually. You have to log off and log in for the changes to be applied, and now when you log in, you will log in into a new shell. Okay, I can do it on certain other tab here. First let us know what are the shells we have. cd/bin Here we have to find, do we have C shell? No. Do we have TCSH shell? No. Do we have corn shell? Oh yes, there it is. We have it. Right? LL. So no, we don't have it as a born shell. It is actually bash only. So let us see here. ls star sh, anything ending with sh is a shell. So we have bash shell, we have C shell, we have born shell, we have TCLSH. We don't have any such shell where we can change to another shell. No other working shell we have. So you will also check like this. If you have some other working shell, you can change it. So chsh-s is the command to change the shell. Okay. Now I will go ahead and start writing few scripts now. Before I do that, if you have any questions, you can ask me.